Good evening. My name is Gatel Ruiz Nicholas, and I will be your host for the GRN show. Tonight's segment is about a topic that everyone has on their minds, whether we're homeowners or we seek to buy a home. The housing crisis is in the forefront of our minds. In 2022, a combination of rising prices and climbing interest rates took a major toll on home buying activity. And as a result, cost burden individuals and families are at a higher risk of becoming homeless, which can quickly lead into a vicious cycle of poverty. Here in Broward County, there is a coordinated effort to resolve and address the housing crisis issue. And with us this evening is Sandra Einhorn from the Broward Coordinating Council. She will share with us how we and other parts of the country are addressing this national crisis. So, Sandra, good evening and welcome.
Good evening. Thank you for having me.
Wonderful. Well, I thank you. I know this is a very crazy time right after the holidays, so I appreciate you taking the time to really talk about this very important issue. So my first question is, what is Broward County's Affordable Housing Trust Fund?
So great question. The affordable housing crisis is really something that has been plaguing our county since coming out of the recession a little bit more than a decade ago. We were really ground zero for underwater mortgages and for condo conversions. And so the affordability that I think many of us had, or many folks had before the financial collapse, coming out of it was a lot harder for South Floridians, specifically those that are lower income or on a fixed budget. So as we started to really galvanize support around the issue, in 2016, United Way published their ALICE report. ALICE is an acronym that stands for Asset Limited, Income Constrained, and Employed, similar to your working poor. And we saw that their housing costs, as we all know, was their top concern. And because they weren't meeting their housing costs within an appropriate budget, which is 30%. So I'll use this real quick to say, when you hear the term affordable housing means housing that is affordable to you and to your household. It's not any specific housing product. It's not the projects. It's not low-income housing. It's not poor people housing. Affordable housing is a concept that says no matter what you earn every month, you should not be spending more than 30% of your monthly expenses on housing in order to really be able to budget properly, right? So if you're spending too much money on housing, you can't afford other basic necessities like food and healthcare and childcare and transportation. And we all know that housing is the first bill we're going to pay every month, right? Because if we don't have a roof over our head, then the rest of it doesn't really matter, correct? And so as we really looked at what are some of the tools that we need to add to the toolbox to increase affordable housing options, the Broward County Trust Fund was one of those tools that previously we didn't have, that we now, thanks to the voters passing it by referendum to the tune of 72% in favor of the creation of the trust fund back in November 2018, we now do have that mechanism. A lot of people in the real estate industry will be familiar with the Sadowski Trust Fund. The Sadowski Trust Fund is the state trust fund that oftentimes does not receive its full appropriation from what comes out of the trust fund. And so what we wanted to do in Broward was to create a mechanism, but to create a mechanism, the fund itself, that could not be used for any other purpose. So the Broward County Affordable Housing Trust Fund is a lockbox. Any money that goes into the trust fund stays in the trust fund and is not used for any other purpose. It does not go back into general revenue at the end of the year. It is a commitment by currently the Broward County Board of County Commissioners, as well as other hopefully increasingly other municipal leaders, to put money into the fund. Banks can put money into the fund, private nonprofits, foundations, anyone could put money into the fund, but once it's in the fund, it can only be used to promote and support affordable housing initiatives across the county.
Interesting. When you say promote and support, what does that mean? Does
So
the
that means
county allocates it for home buying, home repair? Just tell us a little bit about that.
So all of the above. Right now, our biggest need, quite honestly, is the creation of new affordable units. There just aren't enough affordable units in the market. And so a lot of the money does go to building new affordable units across the county. And we've seen examples of some of those great developments in Hollywood, in Fort Lauderdale, and Pembroke Pines. All over the county, we're seeing new, really nice housing product to go up that is affordable to, again, seniors, veterans, and people that are in lower wage industry sectors, lower wage jobs. These are units that are affordable to them, but there is some money in the trust fund that does go towards home ownership opportunities that include both first-time down payment assistance and home repair programs as well.
Great, great. Any of this fund is used for assisting the homeless?
So there are many different pots of money that work with persons experiencing homelessness. Specifically in the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, again, part of those dollars to build new units does go for permanent supportive housing, which does support persons that are experiencing homelessness. So a great example of that, which will open their doors early next year, is 7 on 7th. That is a partnership between the Broward Partnership for the Homeless, JWR Construction, and Green Mills Group as the developer. So that'll bring nearly 100 units, 100 affordable units, of which a percentage of those are specifically going to go to persons that are experiencing homelessness.
That's very encouraging, and it's good to hear. Now, I understand, there was a needs assessment that was done, and I'm not sure who conducted this particular project, and what are some of the findings you feel that our viewership should know about?
Great. So the assessment is done every 3 years. It was last done in 2018. Because of the pandemic, we wanted to, and by I say we, I don't mean me, I say we collectively as the community, wanted to make sure that we could have data as real time as possible. This housing assessment effort is led by Dr. Ned Murray from the FIU Metropolitan Center. And there were a couple things. The two critical findings were really just the scope and scale of Broward County's affordable housing needs are substantial, and that, as we know, they impact a broad spectrum of economic, social, and quality of life issues. But it also reiterated, unfortunately, what we already knew before. Renter households are the most vulnerable because of low household income, low wage employment, their limited options and accessibility, and excessive cost burden levels. We also saw that, unfortunately, 92% of Broward County residents cannot afford the current median sales price of a single family home. The single family median sale it's fluctuated. Of course, it's been anywhere from $550,000 to $600,000 in 2022 alone, which is a striking increase. So less than 8% of Broward County households can afford that median sale price of a home. In fact, during the pandemic, we also, for the first time ever, saw the median sales price of a condo exceed $200,000. So even when single family homes might not be an affordable option for your family, to consider the fact that even townhomes or condos are increasingly becoming unaffordable is certainly a concern. And really that just goes back to diminished economic and social well-being. Broward County's economic competitiveness, our resilience, our quality of life, these things are all at risk. Our impacts on our tourism industry, on healthcare, on retail, these are sectors that really rely on lower wage employees. And so how can we continue to be competitive in these sectors when we continue to provide low wages for so many of these employees that work within this sector? Eventually, they're just going to move somewhere where their talents either pay them more or where their cost of living is significantly less than what it is here.
It's interesting, you have people could be making six figures and have decent credit. However, they're not able to find a home. Either the homes are going to investors where they pay cash, or they just cannot find something affordable. And what I have seen as well, and I think we're evolving into a different type of state, there are so many condominiums that are really targeted, or that exists for people who are 55 years and older.
Correct.
That
And
population,
even those, and so, tying it back to post Surfside building codes and condo requirements and the insurance crisis, condos used to always be the affordable place to live. And even if that condo in and of itself is maybe, let's say the condo is only $100,000, which sounds super affordable, but your HOA dues are thousands of dollars a month and your insurance is thousands of dollars a month, suddenly that $100,000 condo isn't so affordable anymore. And not just for that individual condo owner, but again, part of living in a condo is you are tied to your other condo tenants, to the other condo residents. And so when you have situations where you've got people being foreclosed out of condos that they own free and clear because they can't afford the special assessment, they can't afford the insurance, now you have the rest of the condo building that's having to pay those fees that now that vacant property does not have. And so there are a lot of other issues that all bubble back into the lack of housing affordability.
With the condo and the HOA or the condo association maintenance fees, is there anything that can be done? Because I think it's really, when I think about someone on fixed income, like you said, they can own their condo for a while and no mortgage. Nevertheless, because of maintenance fees and homeowners association, $1,000, $700 a month, what can be done about that? Or is there some type of initiative that residents can tap into?
So the truth is no. The truth is, again, post Surfside, we saw the tragedy in Surfside. We saw what happens when you have a group of condo owners that keep saying, tomorrow, 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 tomorrow. And while, may we all pray that we never see another building come down, I think that there is some responsibility of our government to make sure that we are holding condos to a physical building standard that can withstand hurricanes, that can withstand climate change, that could withstand these things that are going to make a building age. And so oftentimes these things they're not inexpensive. And, part of what's so challenging about addressing housing affordability is it is very expensive. All of these things that we are talking about cost a lot of money. So it's easy to say someone should be doing something, we should be doing more. But then when you really think about the economics of it, okay, where's the money going to come from? Okay, well, if we're looking for the government to, to do it, well, guess where the government gets their money from? Us.
Taxpayers.
Correct. So it's sort of frustrating to know that for the most part, we know what some of the answers are to these things, but the macroeconomics of addressing these issues and the enormity of the issue is sometimes so overwhelming. Sometimes it's just easier to go do something else. And so when you ignore a problem, it only gets worse. And so every day we find ourselves in a problem that's worse, and whatever solutions might be proposed are not going to be supportive of everybody,
Mhm.
and in some cases are going to make things worse.
Well, we're going to take a short break. Before we do that, I'd like to remind everyone to please follow us on social media, share, like, comment, and subscribe to our YouTube channel under the GRN Show. So we'll be right back.
Priced out of paradise. A new real estate study reveals something we may already know. Home buyers want affordable prices, and it seems many buyers are willing to travel to get them.
WPTV's Matt Cesney found out in South Florida, many buyers driving north on I-95.
In Port St. Lucie, the big secret is really not a secret anymore.
Home price is very cheap. It's very slow paced, not as much traffic.
Lizette Sanchez and her husband and 2 young children this year bought a house and moved into the Port St. Lucie community of tradition after leaving Broward County, along with many others.
A few neighbors have moved up here as well, from Hollywood, from Palm Beach. And they said the same thing. They came for the house, for the prices.
Seeking out affordable homes is something happening nationwide. The online real estate site Redfin says a record 32% of buyers look to move to different areas in the first quarter of this year. And they're going to places they can afford was their only option.
Typical new construction home would start you off at about $425. You can even find stuff as low as $400 right now.
Sunsiri Gonzalez is a real estate agent in Port St. Lucie who grew up in South Florida and sees buyers now giving up on finding homes there, coming to the Treasure Coast.
And I even offer to help them in Palm Beach, but oftentimes it's just out of their price range.
Zillow's home price index for Port St. Lucie at 370K is a solid 70,000 less than the index number in Palm Beach County. And real estate experts here have their heads spinning with buyers seeking lower prices, even those from northern states.
They'll find, hey, we want to go down to Palm Beach, we want to be in Fort Lauderdale, and we go, okay, great, this is the square footage that you want, and then, oh, it's going to cost us that.
In the past year, home values here have risen, but real estate experts say with thousands of new construction homes being built, there is plenty of inventory for buyers, something that's in very short supply in Palm Beach County. In Port St. Lucie, Matt Cesney, WPTV, News Channel 5.
We are back, and we have with us Sandra Einhorn from the Broward Coordinating Council. We're talking about a topic that we all are concerned about, and that is affordable housing. You know, it's interesting you mentioned affordable housing is what is affordable to a person. I have to tell you, I was very disheartened. I had a conversation with someone, an elected official, and we were talking about, you know, how are we handling affordable housing in our community and so forth. And the person said, I don't want to use that term, affordable housing, because of the connotation. So I was a little bit taken back. So I had to say, what about workforce housing? Well, the person felt a little more comfortable with that. But I like the fact, Sandra, you've mentioned affordable housing is whatever is affordable to the individual. It doesn't have anything to do with the person, income, socioeconomic background. So I think we need to reiterate, you know, because you have residents.
The problem with workforce housing is also twofold. One, workforce housing is very specific. It is housing that is built for persons that earn, depending on the program, as low as 60% of area median income to as high as 120%, maybe 140% of area median income. But the truth is, in Broward County, over half of our workforce earns less than 60% of area median income, which means that over half of the Broward workforce wouldn't even qualify to live in what some would call workforce housing. The other suggestion about workforce housing is if you're not in the workforce, you shouldn't be able to live. And so, you know, what does that say to our elderly? What does it say about
Yes.
You know, what does that say for college kids? You know, what does that say for persons with disabilities? You know, what does that say to people that might be on a fixed income, not necessarily reflected in the workforce? So I hear it often. They don't want to say affordable housing because of what it sounds like. And I say, listen, you know, whether you like what it sounds like or not, affordable housing, you know, if you want to call it housing affordability, then call it housing affordability. But the idea that we're just going to call it workforce, first of all, is just blatantly incorrect, because that's not what it is. But perhaps more importantly, again, suggests that only if you are represented in the workforce should you be able to have a place to live.
Very good points. Good points. And I'm so glad you clarified that, because you always have those who say, not in our backyards, not in our community. And I've had people say, well, you know, if they need affordable housing, they shouldn't even live here. So that's not the right attitude.
So again, I hear these things often, and I think that people take for granted just how much of our employees in Broward County that we rely on every day earn so little that they can't afford to live. So it's easy to say, you know, oh, well, if you can't afford to live here, don't live here. But then don't complain when your service at a restaurant sucks, or you're staying at a hotel and your room isn't getting cleaned, or you can't walk into a bank, you know, into a bank because there's no teller, or you're forced to use self-checkout at Publix. So, you know, I think oftentimes you don't think about just how many employees we rely on as a community that are low wage. Where are you going to drop your child off if there's no preschool teachers because they can't afford to live here? You know, I used to sort of get irked when I heard things like that. And then now when I hear it, I'm like, okay, let's talk about what happens if, quote unquote, those people don't live here anymore. Like, we got a problem if low wage employees, you know, don't want to live here anymore because they can't afford to live here anymore, for one. And again, you know, while there are some, the acronym is NIMBY, not in my backyard, while there are some NIMBY, you know, NIMBYism, I think some of it sometimes is misunderstood. I think sometimes the pushback is really more against density than necessarily who's going to live in it. Because again, when you look at affordable housing product today, you can't tell what building has people, lower wage employees living in there versus, and, you know, the biggest one, like I said at the beginning of the show, housing is the first bill you're going to pay. So whoever you think those people are, they're already living near you. You just don't see them because they can't afford to leave their house. You know, they can't be healthy consumers of the economy. They can't go out to eat. You know, they can't take long walks in the neighborhood park because they're working all the time so that they can afford this rent that's way more than 30%. So to me, these are just education opportunities to really
Absolutely. Absolutely, absolutely. And I feel the same way you do, because we all have a responsibility, you know, to our community, and everyone should be welcome, whether they are on limited income. Or we should welcome everyone and not be so exclusive, you know, when we say we don't want it around us.
It's not even about being exclusive. It's about realizing that even the people that are within your exclusiveness are struggling with housing affordability.
That is so true.
This is not an us versus them. This is recognizing that you yourself might be suffering from housing unaffordability, but because it's not as bad as other people, you don't realize it. You know, housing impacts, there's not a single person that isn't impacted by housing affordability, you know, again, we all are,
you know, with the insurance and everything.
You know, the number of people that you rely on every day that make up the backbone of our economy. You know, I'm a homeowner, so just within my own home, I wouldn't trade my pool guy for the world, you know, the lawn maintenance company that we have, you know, if these people were to go away, that would be disastrous for my family.
Absolutely.
You know, with my kids' teachers, their, you know, their coaches and their after school activities, you know, all of the, so many of the people we interact with day to day, our own colleagues, many of them are also, they might not be bragging about it because who wants to brag about it, but they might not be able to afford where they live, and they could sure benefit from proper affordable housing.
Absolutely. You know, during the pandemic, I heard some horror stories about renters where the landlords would take advantage of the situation. How are we addressing the high cost of rentals?
Well, to be honest, there's only a certain amount that, you know, that we can do locally, because the state preempts a lot of local solutions. On the flip side, and certainly there's a lot of bad actors, just as there are bad actors in every industry. But I think it's also important to note that a lot of landlords are small business owners themselves. And, you know, they've seen their insurance, they've seen their costs go through the roof as well. And to a certain extent, you know, they're going to have to pass those increased prices along to the renter. That's certainly not always the case. Broward County does have a tenant's bill of rights. You can look it up online. It was recently updated during the course of the pandemic. So if any renter, if any tenant is facing an issue with their landlord, I would strongly suggest that they take a look at those Broward County tenants bill of rights to see what recourse they may have. But again, I think sometimes it's difficult to look at a situation from all sides when it's impacting you in a way that it's hard for you to see the other side.
Certainly. You know, I grew up north in New York City, and I think one of the beauties, one of the things I've seen, particularly in New York City, is where you have these high rises or apartment complex where you have seniors, you have single mothers, and then you have those who are making big bucks. So it could be on, you know, Madison Avenue, some of the areas where you have affluential family, very affluent family. I am not sure how they've managed to balance affordability. And then, of course, the outcomes for their businesses. So I know New York has programs. What is there anything in the what do we have here in Florida, or what are we looking at in the future to ensure that, again, if we're building 200 condos or apartments, some of it should be left, you know, for those who cannot afford to pay the full price?
So a few things. One, again, the state preempts Broward County or any local government from doing anything. They passed a law a couple of years ago that states that anything you force onto a developer, local government would have to financially compensate them for it and make sure that it's even. And, you know, I think it's important to realize that while we might not always agree with it, and certainly greed is never to be honored or validated, that, you know, we do live in a capitalistic society, and, you know, the risk with affordable housing, both with just the project in and of itself, as well as the complexity of financials. If we expect a multifamily developer to be required to do anything above and beyond what they're planning to do, there needs to be a mechanism for them to be supported in that, other than you just have to do it, because that gets into a very slippery slope. Specifically with New York, I would say, while there are perhaps some great programs in New York, Broward County is in a much better situation than New York. You know, the number of persons experiencing homelessness on the streets of New York City is astronomical as compared to Florida. You know, I think that sometimes there are programs that sound good in theory that when it's implemented. New York also has much higher taxes. So it's easy to provide programs when your taxes are double. But again, the end user is still paying that tax. So it's sort of a catch-22. Some of the things that we found successful here in Broward County is bonus density units. And so what that means is if a developer wanted to build a 100-unit building and they want to build 120 units, then they can, but a percentage of those units needs to be affordable. So it's sort of, we're not going to tell you what to do, but if you're asking us for more than what you're supposed to be allowed to do, then there is going to be a component of affordability that is built into you being able to do more than what you wanted to do. And so I think
like that. I like that a lot because I think that's one of the ways we can minimize the impact of homelessness. We can make it a little more affordable. And with many of the programs municipalities have, whether it's first-time home buying or whatever, I'm hoping some of those funds can also be used to compensate the developers, at least initially.
So again, what I was starting to say was, but then we go back to not in my backyard. We are a very suburban county. We're not used to having big, tall buildings like in New York on any of our streets, no matter who lives there. So like I said, some of that opposition is not just, I don't want those people living there, but it's also, I don't want that big building anywhere near my little building. And I think that we all need to accept the fact that we're going to need to have bigger buildings, specifically bigger buildings around transportation corridors, to make it easier for our working class to be able to not only afford where they live, but maybe give up a car and utilize public transportation. So a lot of the things in Broward that we're looking at as it relates to housing affordability also ties into transportation and mass transit.
Absolutely. That is great. My last question, I've seen what happened in Naples, in Tampa, on the West Coast, actually 2 weeks before Ian. I spent 5 days in Naples. It was just beautiful. And the hurricane came up. So obviously climate change and natural disaster, they become, it's no longer a seasonal thing, but it could be any time. I'm sure it's impacting the housing market. What are some of the solutions that we're seeing or, our viewership should look for?
Again, we touched on it a little bit earlier. It's a big ticket item. There really isn't any inexpensive way to address these things. And I think what people need to understand is when we're looking to the government to fund a solution, the government gets their funding from taxpayers. So it's a catch-22 when we want government to take action because we're the ones that are ultimately paying for that action. I think that we're starting to see some innovation coming out of the private sector. Businesses, again, it's hitting their bottom line and they're also seeing the recognition for it. And so it's really my hope that the private sector, that businesses will continue to take the lead in innovation as it relates to climate change, both in innovation of ideas and innovation of those ideas becoming cost effective. Because I think that we have a lot of solutions to address climate change, but they're cost prohibitive. We can't spend trillions of dollars on something that might work, that might make a difference. And so, it's difficult. What I would encourage people to do is think about themselves, think about their way of life, and think about what they can do to decrease their carbon footprint. Whether it's composting or it's driving less and walking more or using less single-use plastic bags. All of these things sound small, but if everyone played more of a role in reducing their own economic footprint, I think we could do just as much as the government coming through and passing new laws or funding some new project with so many zeros, it makes our heads spin.
Now, this new project, I believe it's a state initiative. Is it My Safe Home, Florida Safe Home Program?
Yes,
Tell
it's
us a
called
little
My
bit.
Safe Florida Homes Program.
My Safe Florida Home Pro, what is it?
My Safe Florida Homes Program.
Got it, got it. So that's an initiative I've kind of been reading a little bit about. Would you like to touch on that, please?
Sure. So this is a program from the state of Florida. And it is basically, it's a wind mitigation program. It provides wind mitigation inspections, and then it provides wind mitigation grant awards for home construction. Based on the amount of funding, the state anticipated between 11 and 12,000 grants to be distributed across the state. There are several qualifications in order to qualify for the program. It must be your homesteaded residence, your primary residence. The home has to be insured for less than $500,000. The home must be in what's referred to the wind-borne debris region of the state. So there are different eligibility areas. You can also retroactively, so the construction permit for the home has to be prior to 2008. And the homeowner has to allow the home to be both inspected before and afterwards. It does talk about a 2-to-1 match program where the government will give you $2 for every $1 you spend, up to $10,000, which is fantastic if your project is close to the $15,000 range. But anything above that $15,000 or that $10,000 threshold would have to be covered by the homeowner.
Okay, well, it's something, because so many people, they are unable, impact windows can be pretty costly, and many people are going that route, but I think it's really important for people to ensure their safety, and every little bit helps. If you get $2 per dollar, you may not be able to complete the project all at one time, but at least you could get started, and then down the road.
I would certainly, really, really, really emphasize to any homeowner to be very careful when taking on a project like that and not being able to complete it in a timely manner, both because your insurance company will ding you for it, and also because if half of your home is safe for a hurricane and a storm comes and the rest of it isn't, then the work that you just did might have been for nothing because the other half of your home. So we have seen in my previous role, I ran a nonprofit that did home repairs. We do oftentimes see work that was started for the outside of the home that unfortunately couldn't get completed because the homeowner ran out of funds. And it ended up just turning into a really bad situation for them, where they ended up spending way more time, effort, and money.
Wow.
Than had they been able to finish it the first time. So,
Gotcha,
I think it's really important to read the parameters, make sure that you qualify, and make sure that you're going to be able to undertake whatever project from beginning to end in a timely manner, accounting for, delays perhaps with your building department, delays with, supply chain issues. I mean, this is already going to be a pretty lengthy process, but I would strongly urge any homeowner that's considering this to really make sure that they have the capacity and the wherewithal to see it through.
Great point. Great point. Well, Sandra, this has been so informative. I want to thank you for joining us, and I'm sure our viewers will find this information valuable. I personally find it very valuable, and kudos to all the wonderful things that are happening in Broward County to maintain home affordability. So I look forward to hearing more, and thanks for all that you do. And I'd like to hear a little more about other projects that the county has to kind of help homeowners. So I'm sure I'll have you back as a guest. So thanks again for joining us today.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me.
All right, great. Well, viewers, we're going to take a short break. We'll be right back.
Tonight, ever-growing concerns over home affordability. Nationally, the American dream out of reach for more and more people, including many South Florida families priced out of paradise. What would it take to stabilize an extreme market? WPTV's Todd Wilson tonight with insight from a pair of market experts. Todd?
Well, the experts that I spoke with told me that the reason for the price hike, nationwide price hike in housing, is for two reasons: low supply and low wages.
Florida's marketed itself as paradise, but like so many areas right now, life in paradise is now coming with soaring costs, in part because of so many people who are now moving to South Florida. Sophia Johan with Florida Atlantic University's finance department says one reason buying an affordable home here in Florida is tough is the inability to keep up with demand.
But we're not building as many houses for these new migrants, right? For those moving from Texas, California, enjoying the good weather, enjoying the livability, the security, the safety that we have here.
Adding to the affordability crisis, Johan says, is a lack of income, people simply not making enough.
Home prices are rising much faster than salaries are rising. So it seems like it's less affordable.
So Florida's not alone in the struggle for affordable housing. Overall, affordability nationwide is nearly the worst on record. Right now, the average monthly mortgage payment is at $1,809 nationally. That's a spike of more than $550 per month year to date. And since the onset of the pandemic, the typical mortgage payment in the U.S. has increased nearly $800. Realtor Jeff Lichtenstein with Echo Fine Properties says we're living through an extreme market.
So if you look just at Jupiter, for example, if you go back to 1980, there were 9,300 people in Jupiter. Today there's 62,000 people in Jupiter. So that's a seven-fold increase. And there's no more land to create new supply. But you still have demand of people coming in.
Well, that's right. Well, what would bring some relief? Well, Jeff says increase the supply, but of course, that will take some time. In Palm Beach County, Todd Wilson, WPTV News Channel 5.
We are back, and there's been quite a bit of information shared by Sandra about the whole issue of the housing crisis, as well as opportunities right here in our backyard in Broward County. But I kind of want to end and share just a few things. For example, Harvard University did a study, and what we're finding out across the country is that the housing market is not reachable for many. And you've heard, Sandra, the majority of the people here in our county, they're not able to really purchase a home because of the affordability issue. The annual income to afford the median price home in most places in the United States is between $100,000 to $200,000, whereas before somebody could be making $60,000, $70,000, and they were able to find a home and purchase their homes and reach the American dream. But here in Florida, it's about the median price of a home. She said 500,000, but you may be able to find maybe a condo. You may be able to find a townhouse for $232,000, according to the 2020 Census Bureau data. Sale prices tell a different story. Florida Realtors' most recent statistics indicated that the median sale price for a single-family home in the state of Florida is as high as $400,000 as of August 2022. So creative solutions must be identified, not only to add additional home and program to close the gap for different age and ethnic groups, but also to minimize the risk of homelessness and poverty. If you or someone you know want to buy a home, consider the following. First, I would say familiarize yourself with tools like Zillow, Redfin, and NACA to see different programs. Research the neighborhoods and use credit and mortgage resources these organizations may offer. First-time home buying program is one that really has allowed many people to purchase their first home, and most municipalities have a program locally. So check that out, because if you could get $15,000, $20,000, $25,000 towards your closing costs or towards the purchase of your new home, that will take you a long way. And a mistake that many people do is that they rush into buying their homes. You know, it is the largest asset that most of us will ever own, and home buyers as well. So for decades, you know, you will have your home. So take your time, do your homework, and when in doubt, spend less than you think you can afford, because emergencies do come up. So those are some of the things I would like to recommend before buying a home. So with that, I want to say thank you to you for joining us this evening. And until next Saturday, you have a wonderful weekend. Good night.